The lights hit like fire under the velvet glare of the Graham Norton show. Applause faded into murmurs as Graham, ever the smiling provocateur, leaned in and twirled his cue card. So, Denzel, 8 Academy Award losses. That's gotta sting, right? The studio chuckled, just as the camera zoomed on Denzel Washington's face. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't even smile. Instead, he leaned back in that slow, deliberate way that only someone with absolute presence can manage. The tension dropped like a guillotine. 8 losses? Denzel repeated. He tilted his head, voice calm but sharp enough to slice glass. You counted wrong. You forgot the lives changed, the minds opened, the stories told. I don't lose when truth gets heard. Graham blinked, eyes flickering with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. The crowd stopped laughing. One gasp. One awkward cough. And let me ask you this, Denzel continued, now sitting forward, eyes locked on Graham like a laser-guided missile. When was the last time you got applause for telling the truth, without needing a punchline? The silence was louder than anything Graham had ever heard in his studio, the studio lights dimmed just enough for tension to flicker across the faces of the audience. Graham Norton leaned in with his trademark smirk, casually flipping through his cue cards. Then, without much ceremony, he dropped it. So, 8 Oscar losses, Denzel? That's quite the collection. The audience chuckled, unsure if it was meant to sting or entertain. Denzel didn't flinch. He turned his head slowly, eyes locking with Graham's, face calm, too calm. 8 losses, he repeated, his voice low but resonant. You sure you're not counting your punchlines? The studio gasped. Graham froze, the grin fading slightly. Denzel wasn't done. I came here to talk about craft. About the weight of playing Malcolm, Reuben, Whip. Not to get reduced to a scoreboard by a man who's never stepped on stage unless it's padded with laughter tracks. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rose. A producer flinched off camera. But let's get something straight, Denzel continued, leaning forward now, voice steady like a blade. I'd rather lose 8 Oscars doing real work than win one for pretending to be funny. The silence was volcanic. Graham tried to laugh it off, his signature grin stretching just a little too wide. All right, he said, waving his hands as if to brush away the heat. Just keeping the mood light. But Denzel didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't blink. He leaned forward slightly, the entire room shifting with the gravity of that movement. His voice was low, calm, too calm. See, that's the thing, Graham. When people try to keep it light, they usually end up exposing something they didn't mean to. The audience had stopped clapping. There were no chuckles. No shifting in seats. Just silence thick enough to taste. Denzel went on, his gaze pinning Graham to the spot like a nail to a wall. You got jokes. Cute ones. But I ain't a character in your monologue. I'm not here to play your setup. I didn't walk through decades of this business to be the punchline to your fake stats. Graham raised a hand as if to interject. It's just. No, listen, Denzel cut in, his tone sharper now. You tossed out a number, 8 losses. That's not just inaccurate. It's lazy. And when you're lazy with a black man's record, that's a choice. Don't dress it up like humor. Camera lights flickered. Producers behind the scenes froze, unsure whether to cut or let it roll. But the audience couldn't look away. You want to count something? Denzel asked, now sitting straight. Count the nights I spent grinding when no one called back. Count the roles I turned down because they made us look stupid. Count the men who looked like me and never got past episode 1. Don't count made-up losses and pretend it's comedy. Graham looked stunned. And for once, the quick-talking host had no follow-up. Denzel turned to the crowd, giving them a second to breathe. You don't get to rewrite someone's life just to get a laugh. The room erupted, some in support, some unsure. But everyone felt it. Graham had poked a giant. And now, the giant was wide awake. Graham swallowed hard, his voice suddenly a register lower, less host, more human. I didn't mean it like that, Denzel. I was just trying to loosen things up. Denzel shook his head slowly, leaning back in his chair with a weary smirk. You think I'm tight, brother? You think I flew across the Atlantic to sit here and be reduced to a blooper reel? The crowd was dead quiet. Even the musicians near the set were frozen, eyes darting between the two men like a tennis match nobody expected to turn violent. Graham tried to reset. It's just. I bring everyone down to earth here. That's kind of the brand. Denzel's eyebrow twitched. Yeah. So when Meryl's on, you bring up her childhood trauma? Or when Tom shows up, you flash his divorce headlines across the screen? No, Graham muttered. No, Denzel echoed firmly. Because you respect their journey. You don't poke holes in their legacy just to entertain your audience. But with me? A few awards, a legacy of roles, and all you see is a number you pulled off some blog? The silence was suffocating. Then Denzel dropped the final punch. You want to joke about failure? Let's talk about your own. You've been interviewing people for decades. How is it that you still think a man's worth is found in his weakest moments? Graham blinked rapidly. For the first time in the show's long history, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but under the lights. Denzel wasn't finished. You bring guests on for laughs, but you don't ask what those laughs cost. You don't know what I buried to get here. You don't know who I buried. You see a smile and think it comes cheap. It doesn't. The audience shifted, visibly emotional now. What started as lighthearted was now raw, vulnerable, and unfiltered. Denzel sat forward again, calmer now. I'm not mad at you, Graham. I'm just tired. Tired of being everyone's comic relief while carrying the weight of 1,000 stories no one wants to hear unless they're packaged with a punchline. The camera cut to Graham. His smile was gone. And the show had never been more real. The studio felt colder now, like someone had cracked open a window to let truth in and the air had turned sharp. Graham, known for his ability to pivot awkward moments into comedy, leaned forward with a fragile smile. You're right, Denzel. I crossed a line. I was trying to entertain. Denzel cut in. Yeah, you were entertaining. Entertaining the same tired narrative. Tough guy actor, big legacy, let's make him human by pulling him down a peg. You didn't cross a line, Graham. You stood on it and danced. The audience didn't laugh. They listened. Denzel's eyes were locked in. You know what I've noticed? When I talk about my work, my upbringing, my choices, there's always this smirk. Like it's unbelievable that someone who looks like me could have navigated Hollywood without some dirty secret or shortcut. He glanced briefly at the audience. But here's the truth, I didn't cut corners. I didn't sell out. And I didn't step on anyone to rise. That's why these little games, they don't land. Graham's voice softened, almost apologetic. I guess I underestimated how personal this could feel. You didn't underestimate, Denzel replied. You dismissed. You assumed I'd take it, laugh, play along. But I've done that for years. Tonight? The joke stops here. The control room, according to a behind-the-scenes source, considered cutting to commercial. But even the producers knew, this was no longer entertainment. It was transformation. Denzel shifted forward, eyes calm but fierce. This platform you have? It matters. It tells the world who's worth listening to. And if your version of worth is who's easiest to mock, then you're not a host. You're a hitman in a suit. The crowd gasped. Then, a single clap. Then a few more. A slow, rising ovation, not for drama, but for truth. Graham didn't stand, but Denzel did, and he didn't need to say another word. Graham leaned back in his chair, his smile now visibly forced. Well, Denzel, I think maybe we've both said enough for tonight. Denzel didn't sit. Didn't blink. You think silence is safer than being wrong out loud. But see, that's not how this works for people like me. Silence doesn't protect us, it buries us. The studio lights glinted off Denzel's face, highlighting the stern calm of a man who had been through fires far worse than televised awkwardness. His voice didn't rise, but it filled every inch of the space. You get to package your wit in charm, Graham. But I don't get that luxury. Every time I step into a room like this, I represent more than myself. And when you try to reduce me to a punchline, it's not just about ego, it's about legacy. Graham looked momentarily disarmed, then tried again with a chuckle. All right. That was deep. Can we breathe again? No, Denzel shot back, not missing a beat. You don't get to ease tension that you created. That's not resolution, that's manipulation. The audience murmured. Several heads nodded. There was no laugh track to cover this moment. Denzel took a slow step forward, his tone softening but only slightly. You want to make jokes? Fine. But make better ones. Ones that don't come at the cost of the people who've had to work twice as hard to get half as far. And maybe next time, he added, turning slightly to the cameras, you'll think twice before you turn your guest into your target. A producer offstage whispered frantically into a headset, but the audience? They were locked in. Every word Denzel spoke sliced through the usual gloss of late-night banter like a truth saber. And in that moment, Graham Norton, brilliant, charismatic, untouchable Graham, looked like a man out of his depth. Because when the mask of humor slips, all that's left, is what you really meant. Graham cleared his throat. Denzel, I think we may be getting a bit too serious here. This is a light show, after all. Denzel shook his head slowly. See, that's the issue right there. You want the image, but not the weight. You want the culture, but not the consequence. You book me for ratings, for clips that go viral, but when the truth shows up with me, suddenly it's too serious. The studio was frozen. I don't come on shows like this just to sell a movie. I come here because I know millions of people are watching, and they deserve something real. Not rehearsed, not sanitized, real. Graham shifted in his seat, reaching for his water, eyes darting toward the producers off camera. Okay, but isn't there a way to say all this without turning it into a lecture? Denzel's stare sharpened. It's not a lecture. It's a reality check. You call it a comedy show, but comedy without awareness is just cruelty in costume. There was no comeback. Just silence. Denzel leaned in slightly, his voice lowering, growing more intense. Let me tell you what happens after a segment like this. I walk off this stage, and my phone buzzes with agents, managers, executives, telling me to smile more next time, be lighter, crack a joke. They want me digestible. But I'm not here to be digested. I'm here to remind you that entertainment has responsibility. At that moment, a camera operator accidentally stepped back into a light stand. A loud metallic clang echoed through the studio, but even that didn't break the tension. Every pair of eyes was glued to the stage. I won't be your safe black friend, Graham, Denzel said, now standing tall, fully composed. Not tonight. Not ever. The audience was dead quiet. And then, someone in the back clapped once. A woman followed. Then the entire left side of the room joined. It wasn't applause for performance. It was for presence. For clarity. For resistance. And Graham? He didn't smile. Because there was no punchline left to hide behind, Graham tried to salvage the moment. Look, Denzel. I respect you, truly. But this isn't what people tune in for. They want fun, laughter. You've turned this into a political monologue. Denzel didn't flinch. No, Graham. I turned it into a mirror. And you don't like what's staring back. That line hit like a strike of lightning. The room's temperature changed. Suddenly, the glossy lights felt harsh, the air thicker. Even the audience's breath seemed quieter. You know what's funny? Denzel said, his voice deceptively calm. You call it a monologue, but I'm only speaking because the space was never made for dialogue in the first place. Graham blinked. What do you mean? I mean, Denzel continued, stepping forward slightly, that shows like this are structured to control the narrative. You laugh, they laugh. You ask, they answer. But when someone disrupts that, when someone brings truth to your setup, it rattles the entire rhythm. And suddenly, it's too much. Too loud. Too serious. He pointed gently toward the crowd. Ask them. Did they come for empty laughs, or did they stay because something real finally broke through? You could hear a pin drop. A man in the audience, maybe mid-40s, nodded silently. A younger woman next to him whispered, "He's not wrong." Graham crossed his arms. So what, I'm the villain now? Denzel's gaze held firm. Not the villain. But definitely the architect of a stage that doesn't know how to hold the weight of a different truth. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. But Denzel wasn't finished. He walked back to his chair, sat down with measured calm, and added, "I'm not here to burn bridges. But I'm also not afraid to light a match if it helps illuminate the cracks." And there it was. The crowd didn't know whether to clap, sit still, or look away. Because in that studio, for the first time that night, the truth wasn't wrapped in a joke. It stood on its own. Graham adjusted in his seat, visibly unsettled. He gave the control room a quick glance, likely hoping for a commercial break that wasn't coming. The studio had never felt this alive, or this exposed. "You came on my show," Graham said, trying to reclaim authority, "and instead of celebrating your work, you hijack the moment with, whatever this is." Denzel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice unwavering. "That's the problem, Graham. You think truth is a hijack. You think honesty is an interruption. But maybe the real question is, what were you planning to do with this platform if I didn't say a damn thing?" The audience stirred. A ripple of murmurs filled the room like wind through dry grass. "I was going to celebrate you," Graham pushed, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I am a fan." "Then listen like one," Denzel shot back. "Not everything I say is for applause. Some of it's for correction. Some of it's for history. And a lot of it is because too many people in rooms like this nod along, and say nothing." Graham hesitated. His usual sharp wit? Nowhere to be found. "You know what makes this country so dangerous right now?" Denzel said, his tone deepening. "It's not just the people in power. It's the ones who dress up silence as neutrality. Who smile on couches while the world outside burns." He turned to the camera now, speaking to someone far beyond the room. "Don't let laughter replace memory. Don't let comfort become complicity. And don't ever confuse being polite with being powerless." The camera stayed on Denzel. No cutaway. No music cue. Just the raw tension of a man daring to speak without asking permission. Then came the moment that broke the room. Graham opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to pivot. But Denzel raised a hand, calmly, confidently. "Let me finish." 3 words. But they carried the weight of every silenced voice the world had chosen to ignore. And in that moment, the host said nothing. The show had stopped being entertainment. It had become something else entirely. For the first time in the broadcast, the studio sat completely still, not out of awkwardness, but reverence. Stephen Colbert leaned slightly forward from his seat beside Graham. Until now, he'd remained silent, watching the verbal firestorm unfold like a stunned spectator at his own dinner party. But now, with a half-smile, he tried to lighten the moment. "Denzel, I think this is the part where I remind everyone it's a comedy show." Denzel turned slowly, no hostility in his eyes, just precision. "That's part of the problem, Stephen. You all think laughter's a life jacket. Sometimes, it's just noise that keeps people from hearing the storm warning." Stephen sat back, his smirk fading. Denzel stood up. He didn't pace. Didn't point. He simply clasped his hands together and looked across the audience, and into the camera. Like he had something to deliver, not just say. I get it. You brought me here to be charming. To share some cute story from a film set, maybe tell a joke about method acting. That's not why I came. He paused. I didn't come to be palatable. I came because too many people are sitting comfortably while millions choke on silence. He stepped closer to the front of the stage. They want me to talk about legacy, he said. But I'm not interested in statues or stars on pavement. I care about whether a young black boy in the South Bronx can walk into a room and not feel like he needs to shrink. The audience was locked in. No phones. No coughing. Just breath held. Pain isn't a punchline. It's not something I perform. It's something I've survived. And if you don't know the difference, you shouldn't be hosting anything. Then he looked back at Graham, and said it as plain as daylight. You counted 8 losses? Let me tell you what you missed. I lost roles because I didn't play dumb. I lost friends because I wouldn't stay quiet. I lost peace of mind every time someone like you smiled in my face and edited out my truth after the cameras stopped rolling. He stepped down off the platform. I didn't come here to entertain you, he said, walking past the stunned hosts. I came to remind you, I'm still standing. The crowd, unsure at first, rose. One by one. Until the entire room was on its feet. And Graham? He stayed seated, trying to laugh, but realizing too late. He wasn't the host anymore. Denzel was. In a world where silence is expected and truth is edited out for ratings, Denzel chose to speak raw, real, and unfiltered. If that shook you, good. Because the world doesn't need another passive guest, it needs a voice that won't flinch. If you felt that fire, hit the like button, subscribe for more unfiltered stories, and drop your thoughts below. We're not done talking. And remember, pain isn't a performance. It's a reminder of what still needs to change.